everyone, this is Carolina Millan, and welcome to a new episode of Beyond the Hustle. And I'm here today with a guest that I've been looking forward to interview for a very long time. He's the founder of Impact Theory, Mr. Tom Bilyeu. How are you, Tom?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on.
No, thank you. For being here, for taking the time to talk to me. And I'm super excited about today. I know you're going to add tremendous value to my audience. So let's get right to it. So for the few people, 2-3 people who may not know much about you yet, can you share a little bit about your story, your background, how you became an entrepreneur? I know that you built a company to $1 billion and you sold it. How was that process? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay, so it's a very long story. I'll give it to you really fast. And then if there's a part that you want to go into, we can dive deeper.
Absolutely.
So I went to film school. I thought I would graduate and get the 3-picture deal. I did not. And this is all before cell phones, before social media. There's no YouTube. So to break into film just felt impossible. And I ended up writing a screenplay. It got turned into a feature film, but I was really devastated by that whole process and how that went. Was very disheartened. I had met these 2 very successful entrepreneurs, and they said, look, you're coming to the world with your hand out. And if you want to control the art, you have to control the resources. So come with us and get rich. And I thought, oh my God, this sounds amazing. Let's do exactly that. I thought it would take 18 months. We were going to build a software company and sell it. And then I was going to start making movies. 18 months turned into 15 years and multiple companies, but it did end up working. One of the companies that we built together was a company called Quest Nutrition. And we took that from not existing to being sold for $1 billion. And I used the money from that success to start the studio that I wanted to start immediately, but just didn't have the ability to do so until that exit. So we founded Impact Theory 6 years ago and have ever since been trying to build a modern media company that is digital first, YouTube first in terms of a lot of the content that we put out. Just a very different approach than the old way. And when we founded, I told the team, look, our job is to stay in business long enough to find our moment of disruption. And I didn't know what that moment was going to be. It ended up being the blockchain, which I wouldn't have been able to guess, but that's certainly how it played out. And here we are now making video games, animation, and all the YouTube stuff that people know me for.
Of course. Well, that is a very condensed version of the story.
A very condensed version. Yeah, there was a lot of hair pulling and distress left out of that retelling, but yeah.
So what are some of those lessons that you learned in that process of building that company that you can share with other people that, you know, that if you knew better, maybe you wouldn't have made those mistakes or anything, any lessons that you learned from there?
Would you rather I go mindset or business, tactical?
Let's go a little bit of both. We have time.
Okay, cool. So in the mindset camp, which really is, I think, the most important. So when I first got in front of the camera, I thought all I was ever going to talk about was business. And what I found was in trying to help people have more success with their business, I had to constantly keep coming back to how to think. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, the real magic is being able to solve novel problems. And to be able to solve novel problems, you have to think in a certain way. And the fast way to round that is from first principles. But most people don't even understand the first principles of how the world works, how their own mind works. And so they constantly fall prey to really dumb things just because they're not, they don't know how to assess their own decision-making process. And so one of the most important lessons that I learned, and it really is a demarcation point in my life. It's a line in the sand. It's one of the only things that's really a line in the sand in my life where it's like my life before and my life after. But it was the realization that I had motivations that I was unaware of. So I was being driven by a desire for other people to think me smart. And I thought I was driven by a desire to be successful. And that wasn't true. And so there was a moment I had been hired by these entrepreneurs that said, hey, you know, let's build this company together. But originally they just hired me as an employee. And I'd been hired by them. and I was arguing for an idea that I knew was dumb and was worse for the company than the idea that they were putting forth. But I needed to have them think I was smart. So I kept arguing until I convinced them of my way of doing it, even though I knew it was wrong. And so I was like, whoa, I'm having this existential crisis of like, wait, do you actually want to be successful, or do you want to feel smart, was how I thought of it at the time. And I was like, okay, look, no judgment on yourself, dear self, but which of these two things do you actually want? Because if you want to feel smart, you need to immediately quit working at this company because they're smarter than you, they're farther ahead than you, and it's just going to be this eternal torture chamber. And conversely, if you really want to be successful, then you need to let go of your self-esteem and just stay here and grow this business. And I realized very quickly, well, that's neither of those are going to work, because I really do want to be successful like that. And I realized at that point that you need to know what your values are and you need to put them in order. And so to be successful wasn't my highest value. That would be my marriage, but it was right below my marriage. And so I was like, okay, well, if this is really going to be that driving thing, I don't think it is wise to give up your self-esteem. I think that people that have no self-esteem and never believe that they will feel good about themselves again, they commit suicide. So I was like, that is not a wise approach. So what am I left with? And so I thankfully realized that I could build my self-esteem around something that moved me towards my goal of being successful. And that was, instead of trying to feel smart or have other people think I'm smart, I can value myself for identifying the right answer rather than being right. And so that was utterly transformative. And so I began, obviously, I understood identity as a concept. And so that's really important to understand that you have an identity, whether you think you do or not. You are living into that identity, whether that identity is empowering you or disempowering you. Most people have a disempowering identity. And so I decided to take conscious control of my identity and to think of myself as the learner. So I'm an average person, but I can get better at anything. And that became what I think of as the only belief that matters. So the only belief that matters is that if you put time and energy into getting better at something, you actually will get better at that thing. Now, the reason that's the only belief that matters is when people feel stuck, lost, hopeless, it's because they think where they're at is a permanent state of affairs. And if you realize that, no, where you're at is a reflection of the choices you have made thus far and your current skill set, but you can make different choices and get a different skill set. And to do that, though, you have to pour time and energy into getting better at that thing. And so that just completely changed my life. So whenever somebody's like, hey, what advice would you give to your younger self? It would be that. If I could have learned that lesson when I was 15 instead of 25, I would be a lot farther along than I am now. So I really see my mission is to get people to understand all of the massive complexity of that idea, which includes understanding that you're having a biological experience. And there's a whole host of things that if you want to tease apart, we can go deeper. But that was really a key lesson in the mindset side. On the business tactical side, it really is first principles thinking and what I call the physics of progress. And I can detail out what the physics of progress are, but I think it's probably best to pause. And if there's any follow-up questions, I'm happy to go into it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great lesson, and I'm sure everybody wants to know what the physics of progress is. So feel free to elaborate a little more.
Okay, so the physics of progress it's basically the scientific method recontextualized for business. So the idea is, the reason I call it the physics of progress is that physics are the foundational rules. It's the only thing, and we don't fully understand physics, but it's the only thing, there's nothing below that. So you have gotten to ground truth. And as you get closer to ground truth, you're able to better predict the outcome of your actions. And going back to the idea that you're having a biological experience, your brain is a prediction machine. And to get good at business, to get good at life, relationships, whatever, you have to get very good at predicting, if I do this, I will get this result. Now, because we are wildly imperfect at that, we need some process by which we can discover what is closer. And do we ever actually get to foundational truth? Certainly not yet. but you can get closer. And so the best example that I can give of this is Newtonian physics. So if our goal is to better predict the outcome of our behaviors, Newtonian, and to do that, we must get closer and closer to the truth. And that as we get closer to the truth, we can determine whether we're closer to the truth by whether or not we are better able to predict the outcome of our behaviors. Okay, cool. So Newtonian physics are actually wrong. They're incomplete, but they were so much better than what we had before that, that it allowed us to begin better predicting the motion of large bodies. And by being able to do that, we're able to do a whole host of things in the real world. But then Einstein comes along and shows actually that's wrong. And if you want, I think you can get to the moon and back with Newtonian physics, but you can't do GPS without Einstein and his theory of relativity, special and general. So it's like, okay, but even that, Einstein died before he was able to take us even a step further to whatever's going to be the unifying theory, where we finally recognize the sum total of the base physical reality. But we're not there yet. But we're able to do all this incredible stuff. So what I want people to understand is business works the same way. So you have your best guess. It's pretty bad, right? So in the beginning, it's the equivalent of the entire universe revolves around the Earth. That's what everybody thought. And it kind of looks like that. When you're standing on Earth, it looks like everything is moving around us. And then somebody goes, ooh, actually, that's not true. We're revolving around the sun. And, you start getting all of these things that better allow you to predict things. So in business, you have your best guess. It's terrible. It's the equivalent of thinking everything revolves around you. And so you create an experiment. So every experiment is meant to show you or to hypothesize about what you need to do to overcome the obstacle that stands between where you are and where you want to go. So you've got a goal, you're in a place, and there's something between you and achieving that goal. So you come up with your best guess as to what you would need to do to overcome that obstacle and get closer to your goal. You then do that thing. So this is the physics of progress. Hypothesis, you run that test. That test is going to fail to some degree. And you realize, oh, wow, okay, so I had my belief about what things were and how to solve this problem were wrong. But in taking that action and being willing to fail, I call failure the most information-rich data stream on planet Earth. So no one should be afraid to fail, but you should be terrified to lie to yourself about the results. So you failed to some degree. You assess that data. Did you make any progress? Did you move a little closer to your goal and just not as efficiently as you would like? Did you stay in exactly the same place, or did you move backwards? So you assess that, and now you're a little bit more informed. You're now closer to Newtonian physics. And so now you go, okay, well, I've learned something, but I still can't do GPS, right? So what's going to be that next thing? To figure out that next thing, you're going to run now a Newtonian experiment. You're going to find out where that breaks down. How much farther did that get you closer to your goal? And as that then lets you down, you're like, okay, I got closer, but I didn't get as close as I wanted, or I didn't go as efficiently as I need to go. So now take your learnings and you do that next thing. And you just keep repeating that loop, and you'll make ever, closer progress towards your goals. The problem is that, because going back to the mindset thing that I realized, most people value themselves for being right. So they have a crisis when they realize that they were wrong. And so now failure becomes something to avoid, makes them feel badly about themselves, and they run in the opposite direction. Whereas if you could just understand at that critical moment where I need to look at the data, you need to really go, this isn't somebody else's fault. This is my fault. I'm not understanding something well enough to accurately predict the outcome of my behaviors. So I need to update my model. Now, if people are willing to do that, they can make progress, but most people won't. They will avoid failure at all costs, and they will stay static in their lives and wonder why they're profoundly unhappy. Going back to, you're having a biological experience, and nature wants to make sure that you're making progress. And so if you're not making progress, you have this sense of, what am I doing? I'm wasting my life. And people will get that feeling even if they're a billionaire, if they're not making progress. And then they're so distraught because they're like, I have all this money, I can buy all these things, but it's not making me feel better about myself. And so then you come to the final thing, and then I will hand it back to you, which is, in life, you have to understand that the only thing that matters is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. And the cheat code to that is to pursue fulfillment at all times. Fulfillment has a recipe, And that recipe is to work really hard to gain a set of skills that allow you to serve not only yourself, but other people in a way that's meaningful to you and to them.
Mm-hmm. I love it. No, that's I love that. And you made me think when you started talking about the Newtonian model, you made me think about Dr. Joe Dispenza, who also talks about how that model is, a bit wrong, I guess. and you mentioned it. And I recently watched your interview with him, and I was going to ask you next, who are some of the people that you have had on your program, on your show, who have left the biggest impact in you? I mean, impact theory, of course. Maybe 2 or 3 lessons you have learned from some of your guests that, have left the biggest impact.
Yeah, so one, David Goggins had a tremendous impact on me in terms of just the sheer tenacity and intensity that's going to be required of you if you want to do something truly extraordinary. That all of us are in a battle with our own mind and our own weakness, and being able to overcome that is incredibly important. But then the next group of guests, and I'll give you names, but it's really a group of guests, are people that study the brain and biology. And so V.S. Ramachandran, who might still to this day be the person that I was most like, I could not believe he agreed to be on my show. And for people that don't know who V.S. is, he's arguably the most influential neuroscientist in the modern era. I mean, the guy's just unbelievable. Unfortunately, he's retreated from public life at this point. And I learned so much from his lectures and his books. He's really, really unbelievable. And if anybody's ever heard of the phantom limb syndrome, he's the guy that really gave that a name and a cure. It's really utterly fascinating what he was able to do. And then David Eagleman is another person that I'll put into that camp, who wrote a book that was wildly influential on me called Incognito, about the things your brain is doing that you don't realize it's doing. And going back to that initial thing I said about people are often driven by motives and desires that they don't realize are being driven by. And so the more I have peeled back the layers of my own mind, the more I have been able to realize, whoa, there are things pulling me and pushing me in directions that when I was oblivious to, I was just sort of living my life by the law of accident. Once I was able to identify them, I could take control and I could stop letting them make me do things that I didn't ultimately want to do, meaning that they weren't moving me towards my goals.
Powerful. Yeah. No, I'm with you. I'm definitely going to be getting that book and researching those people, because that's something I've been working on myself lately, that I realized that my brain or something in my mind is stopping me from like going to the next level. And I think it's very important for people to discover what that is.